What's up, guys? It's your boy, Matty Boy Lowne. No, don't worry, that's not actually how I do commentaries. People that have somehow never, I say somehow never seen my channel. You know, as in, you didn't just stumble this from a suggested video, you didn't just click it knowing it was me. I mean, maybe you did, maybe these are showing up in suggestion boxes. But before I get too much into just random thoughts as these Planet Coaster videos often do, I should probably just continue with my video introduction. But yeah, it does surprise me how many YouTubers kind of still unironically use the whole, oh, hey, it's your boy intro. I feel like it's just become a bit of a meme at this point, a top meme. Anyway, this is a video of Planet Coaster, in case you couldn't tell already. Just for I like to think of my viewers who are blind. I like to keep them in mind whenever I'm recording commentaries. In this Planet Coaster video, we're going to be basically just focusing the entire episode on the construction of a hypercoaster because, well, this is a Planet Coaster series. So far, we've built 2 rides and only 1 roller coaster. And, you know, given that the half the syllables in this game's name are dedicated to roller coasters, it seems rather unfitting that I've squandered 5 episodes. Well, I've spent 4 episodes in this series building not coasters. But in this episode, don't worry, because we are building a roller coaster. So I've said nothing of value so far, but at least I've started padding out this video because it's going to be just under 15 minutes that I can kind of showcase the whole ride. And a lot of people seem to like so let me just rewind. I used to, in Mirror Lake, what I would do for building roller coasters, I would basically cut out all the parts in which I built a section of track, didn't like it, and then deleted it. So basically, you would see the coaster kind of get built as if like I built it in one go without making any changes, if that makes sense, because I just cut all the changes out to keep the video concise. But the downside of this is that all the coaster construction took place in the space of about 2 minutes, because obviously I speed everything up. And then for one of the coasters, I kind of showed the whole thing get built, kind of not in one go, just showing everything, kind of all the bits that I built and then decided to get rid of because I didn't like the way they came out. And people seem to respond to that quite positively. They said they actually preferred seeing that because it kind of gave a better insight into my process, because that doesn't sound pretentious at all, and that there's actually any level of process in the construction of these things, and not just me thinking, oh, this would probably be quite cool. Yeah, let's do this. But I don't want to put myself down too much. But yeah, that's kind of the logic here. So maybe I'm wrong and you guys actually think this is really tedious and boring, aside from my commentary, of course. But if you prefer just kind of the cut-up coaster building and prefer just not watching me kind of go back over myself, changing elements, then do let me know down below. What is this coaster that we're building? I probably should have introduced this before I'd finished the layout, but this is an Aerodynamics hypercoaster. A hypercoaster is basically defined as any coaster higher than 200 feet. There are exceptions and sort of variants to this rule because it's kind of an archaic term at this point. It was kind of, when the phrase hypercoaster was coined, technology wasn't really available to construct big coasters quite as easily as it is today. So you could argue things like King Dakar, Top Thrill Dragster, they're not really considered conventional hypercoasters, but by the purest definition, to 200 feet or about 70 meters, I believe. And this is an Aerodynamics coaster. There are 2 hypercoasters in this game. They're virtually identical. One of them, not this one, oh god, is it the B&M one? I feel like someone's going to correct me if it's wrong, but the more modern type one, basically. That it goes a little bit faster than the Aerodynamics one, as in this variant, but it's not significant to really have a noticeable impact. And I kind of went with the Aero one because I have a bit more of a nostalgic connection with it. I don't know, it's a more classic coaster for one thing. This Aero style track, or I guess the Vekoma track now, because Vekoma kind of the Aerodynamics don't exist anymore. It's kind of a more archaic kind of way of building roller coaster tracks, and it is very much signature to the Aero. Well, and Vekoma now, I suppose. But this is kind of, it's the same track design as the Blackpool Pleasure Beach's the big one, or the Pepsi Max, which is a hypercoaster of similar design to this. Well, I guess all hypercoasters really have the same sort of design. They are essentially very sprawling, big rides. They tend to just kind of go up a big hill and then drops you down over lots of big airtime hills, taking up a lot of space. Kind of, they go out and then they loop back and come back in on themselves, and that's pretty much the ride. So I kind of went with that, and I was actually quite happy with how this came out. Admittedly, it's not that hard to design hypercoasters because it's pretty hard to mess up the layout. And Planet Coaster, whilst it's very hard to make rides smooth when you're doing complicated inversions and tight turns, it's a dream for building sort of big, smooth, banking hypercoasters like this. So I was quite happy with the way this came out, and we didn't actually use any of the pre-built pieces either. I mean, I did when I was first coming up with the general sort of rough layout. I did use the that one, oh my god, what's it called? The pre-built big figure of 8 cutback thingy. Oh my god, what's it called? I'm not going to pause the video and look it up, I'm too lazy. But you guys probably saw it. But we ended up axing that in favour of, you know, building a custom curve section, and a bit like the Blackpool Pleasure Beach's big one roller coaster, in that it kind of has this quite high altitude, fairly standard turn that then the coaster then loops back on itself. So this is kind of, I'd say that's probably the biggest muse for this ride, the Blackpool Pleasure Beach's big one, although really it doesn't bear that much semblance to it other than the red track, I suppose. And I guess the cars are virtually identical to the big one's cars, but I think that's just the typical car design of this particular type of ride. It's not exclusive to the Blackpool Pleasure Beach's big one. Why don't I just say the big one? Why do I have to keep calling it the Blackpool Pleasure Beach's big one? You know, as opposed to the Thorpe Park big one, for example. I don't know. Anyway, that's pretty much the track layout. I think I did a bit of fine-tuning later on, but for all intents and purposes, that's the track done. So there's just a few more things we can do. Obviously, we have started constructing the station. I kind of went with a very minimalist, modern, sleek sort of style. I can probably cut away in a minute, because I spent a lot of time modelling the interior of this building, and in time-lapse, it's not the most stomach settling thing to watch, because I'm having to constantly lurch the camera around to get a view of what I'm doing kind of on the roof and things, and like looking up from inside, so it's not the most nice thing to watch. And I guess you kind of see me build this bit. Imagine this, but building it on the inside, right? Does that make sense? It's just this, but more of it, essentially. So we can probably just do like a nice little clock wipe there, and oh, my hard drive is making very painful noises. I'm very worried now about my hard drive. It keeps on making, I mean, I write a lot of things to it. I use it exclusively for YouTube content, so Planet Coaster, Kerbal Space Program. I'm not going to back up for it either, so this is another motivation to get another drive. It's a Toshiba 7200 RPM sort of high performance 5 terabyte drive, and Toshiba drives are pretty reliable. I never touch Seagate. I know they had a pretty bad batch of 3 terabyte Barracuda drives, but every Seagate drive I've ever owned, which admittedly isn't very many, has failed. And I have friends and their Seagate drives they're just a notoriously unreliable brand in my experience, and I think that's the general consensus as well. Western Digital tend to be the gold standard, but Toshiba, I've had pretty good experiences with Toshiba drives, and they're cheaper than Western Digital, and people seem to cite the same sort of performance. I guess Western Digital Black and Gold are still the best, but the price for a Western Digital Black drive is insane. And I just think that, I mean, what I'd probably do is I'll keep this drive and use it till it dies, but have a second drive and just sort of have it in a sort of RAID setup, so I've constantly got every file backed up. The only thing that makes me nervous is this Planet Coaster series, because I've pretty much finished the park, and it's going to be stretched out, well, this footage is going to last me quite a few weeks, if not months, so if I lost the footage, that would be pretty disastrous, because it accounts for I'd say about 60 hours at least work, maybe. Actually, I have no idea. I've plugged that figure out of thin air. But it's a long time. It's a lot of work, basically, that I would feel a bit... I don't want it to get lost, basically. So for those of you who don't know what I'm doing here, I'm building the maintenance shed. So the idea is we have a transfer track there, which isn't actually available as a feature in-game. I've kind of sort of simulated a transfer track by building another hypercoaster that kind of runs parallel to this one. And we've kind of made some sort of faux... like sliders and rails to sort of act as a sort of symbolic transfer track. I'd like it to get added to the game one day. A lot of people really want it as like a main feature that they want, and I feel like it's not that particularly urgent, because I view it more as just the aesthetic thing. I feel like if it was the actual game, I would never really see myself using the transfer track. But then again, I only play sandbox, and then cost isn't really an issue, and maintenance is just kind of an annoyance. But I guess from a real, well, I don't say I guess, I mean as an actual real world application of the transfer track, if say we were running the park on a quiet day, or we just wanted to save a bit of money, we could just run one car around the track, not two, and just keep one of the cars parked in the garage. Or if one of them, like I say, needed maintenance doing to it, we wanted to put a sweet sound system in there, a bit like the rock and roller coaster at the Universal Studios Orlando. We could do that in the maintenance shed, I guess. Just do a sort of pimp my ride literally pimp my ride, because it's yeah, okay. And then we could, place this little fence around to just sort of keep guests away from all that dangerous track. We don't want people dismembering themselves. No, we don't. You may notice from in this whole series, the park always looks fairly sort of scarcely populated. I mean, I don't think it's actually open right now. I'm pretty sure I opened it at some point after building this ride. I don't like opening parks until I have at least somewhat of a substantial number of rides and attractions built. So I guess now we've got 2 roller coasters, a flat ride, shops and things. We're pretty much ready to open, but throughout this whole series you won't see many guests in the park. The reason for this is I have the guest cap set to 1,000 for 2 reasons. Because I don't get that. I kind of outgrown the hype of theme parks because I just hate queuing. Queuing just is soul crushing. It's like simulating being in rush hour traffic, which is another thing that is just absolutely devastating as an adult. But you're just standing outside, you've got no radio, and it's the worst part of theme parks. But if we had a park that, say, limited its guest numbers to 1,000, a bit like maybe Discovery Cove does in Orlando, then that would be like a theoretical way of reducing park numbers, and it's owned by some eccentric billionaire that decided to build that giant red tower there for no reason, since guests can't even climb to the top of it. So money is no object to the people that run this park. So from a purely sort of guest satisfaction point of view, we can limit the number of guests to 1,000 just to cut down on queue times. But the main reason why we're doing it for this particular park, after that massive topic divergence, is because of performance. As I'm sure anyone that plays this game is well aware, performance is absolutely terrible. Once you have a lot of guests in the park, the frame rate just drops to an absolute crawl. And you pretty much have to play the game on paused to make it playable, which isn't very fun, because I quite like riding the rides and sort of watching the park and just watching the world pass me by as I'm just sort of flying around the park, which obviously if it's happening at 2 frames per second isn't really kind of that fun. So limiting the guest numbers to 1,000 really improves performance when you're playing the ride, and well, yes, that's why. So other than that, that's pretty much everything built. So you might see me we can just speed up the footage here to get up past the lift hill. You may have seen me build a photo booth as well. Again, photo booths aren't in this game. It's pretty much the same situation as the transfer track, in that I just kind of build 2 information booths and sort of theme it up to look like a photo booth, and just sort of that's where guests can buy on-ride photos. I really am surprised that on-ride photographs aren't a thing in this game, because they were in Roller Coaster Tycoon, and this is obviously the same dev team as Roller Coaster Tycoon 3. And I mean, it's certainly more of a successor to Roller Coaster Tycoon 3 than Roller Coaster Tycoon World and 4 and that 3DS. Did you know there's a Roller Coaster Tycoon on 3DS? No, neither did I until quite recently, because it was that bad. But yes, I was about to say maybe I should stop talking for the POV, but we're pretty much already done. I'll be quiet for the rest of it though. And here we are coming around the final corner now. So I was really pleased with how this ride came out, actually. I feel like I really struck a balance between having the big smoothness of the Hypercoast, but having that sort of classic sort of jerkiness that the Aero coasters tend to have, because they are quite an old design at this point. But yeah, I hope you enjoyed this ride too. Next episode, we're going to be going back to more scenery, but we will be building some more roller coasters. Obviously, we're going to build more roller coasters in this series as well. On screen, there is a link to the playlist with all the previous episodes and the next episode if it's out, which probably it won't be out by the time you're watching this, because most of the views happen before the next episode's out. But if it is, then it's in the playlist. And other than that, thank you very much for watching. I hope you enjoy the rest of your day. And Christmas. It's Christmas coming soon as well, so, that's me being topical.